When you're chasing sounds in a mix, it can be really easy to overcomplicate the process. You add plugin after plugin, you keep tweaking, and you hope that by adding more, it's gonna finally make your mix sound better. But the truth is that the more you stack on, the more confusing and overwhelming things often get. And it often slows you down too. So that's exactly why I built my new plugin company, Carb Audio. We focus on building plugins that replace long, complicated signal chains with simple, results-driven tools. We've got the Smashburger compressor, which gives you punch, glue, character, and transient control all in one place. So instead of having to stack multiple compressors or extra processors, you can just dial it all in one plugin and move on. We also have Busboy, which combines filtering, broad musical EQ, classic bus compression, and limiting all into one streamlined mix bus tool. And then we have Slapshot, which lets you add space and width to a mix, but without having to build complicated signal chains that are used to clean up the muddiness and harshness that typical reverbs and delays would add. Each Carb Audio plugin is designed to remove steps, remove clutter, and help you get results faster. Now you can grab them all individually, or get everything with the all-in bundle, which gives you all of them together at the best possible price. And if you already own any of our plugins, just log into your account, add the bundle to your cart, and you'll see your own personal upgrade discount automatically applied. We even have a free 14-day trial of all of our plugins if you want to try them first. So if you're ready to simplify your workflow and get better sounds in less time, make sure to grab the Carb Audio all-in bundle at carbaudio.com. Hey, welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast. My name is Mike Indovina, and thanks for hanging out with me today. Today, my guest is Nathan Yarborough, and if you're not familiar with him, he is a Grammy-nominated engineer based out of Nashville. He does a lot of work in heavier genres these days. He's worked with artists like Korn, Alice in Chains, Deftones, Halestorm, Rise Against, Evanescence, and a whole bunch more. And in today's episode, we dig into his process of engineering projects with bands like the ones I just mentioned. We cover everything from recording the Deftones and getting their drum sounds to sound really big and full and heavy, but still also very clear. We also talk about recording Korn and getting their drum tones to have so much separation and clarity. And with that particular project, Nathan had a pretty interesting approach for miking up multiple cymbals and stuff like that he gets into in this episode. And if you ever get the chance to listen to the record that Nathan worked on with Korn, it's called The Serenity of Suffering. That record, to me, it's like the stereo image of that drum kit in all of the mixes is just incredible. And a lot of it has to do with the approach that he took here. So we get into a lot of drum recordings because I'm a drum nerd, but we also get into guitar recordings as well. And we talk about his approach to getting heavy, thick guitar tones and some of the things that matter, some of the things that don't matter. We even get into recording bass, and he talks about getting to record the iconic Korn bass sound and some of the stuff that went into that as well. So this is a great episode if you're into a lot of heavy music, because like I said, Nathan does a lot of that. But also, if you're interested in learning more about speed, this episode also covers that too, because as you'll hear early on in this interview, one of Nathan's earliest experiences was working in a Nashville studio where they were recording 5 songs every 3 hours. That's wild to get that many songs done that quickly and at the quality that they're being tracked at. It's insane. And so I had to know, just how is that possible? What kind of things are you doing ahead of time to prepare for that? And how do you maintain the quality that tracks need when you're working that fast? So we obviously get into that as well too. So with all of that said, let's not waste any more time. Let's just jump right into it. Nathan Yarborough, thank you so much for being on the MasterYourMix podcast. How's it going today, man?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. For people who might not be familiar with who you are, what you do, and maybe some of the projects you've worked on, can you give us that background?
Yeah, I'm a recording engineer based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I've been doing this over 20 years now, primarily focused in recording. I've worked on projects like Mastodon, Korn, Deftones. There's some... I should have had a list ready to go, but just in that vein, Evanescence,
nice,
Halestorm.
That's awesome, man. How did you get into all of this?
Well, I mean, probably like most people in this field, when I was a kid, I loved music. I loved playing music. I played in a band. My dream was to, play in a band and tour the world. And, I didn't have any concept of what that entailed. That's just what I was going to do. But like most people, I probably wasn't as good as I thought I was. And it became apparent that I needed some kind of backup plan. So like early in my life, I was introduced to the concept of record. Like when I first started playing guitar, I had a teacher that showed me, how to. He was like, "Oh, you need to document your ideas somehow." So he introduced me to like a 4-track tape recorder. He was like, "This is how you're gonna write songs. You're gonna be a songwriter, and you need to write songs and record them so you can copyright them and all this stuff." And so I kind of got introduced to recording, and it kind of started there. And then when it was time to sort of, okay, we're not going to be a famous musician. So what's the next easiest thing we can do is, oh, well, let's just learn how to record music. So that's kind of what led me there. I found out that it wasn't the next easiest thing to do. But, I kind of fell in love with it, and I went to school for it at a school in North Carolina, Appalachian State University, which had a music program and a small recording program. And I found myself, you had to be a student in the music school to do the recording program, but I kind of found myself not practicing as much and spending more time in the studio, and I just kind of figured out that I enjoyed helping other people capture their stuff rather than, being the performer.
Fair.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a pretty common story. Like you get into the studio, you get fascinated with the equipment, and yeah, for many of us, it's like you either just learn to love the craft of production more than performing or whatever, or it's just like that is plan B for a lot of people as well, right? So I think it's pretty common.
It kind of becomes plan A, and then there is no plan B, so you just figure out how to make it work.
Fair. Now, as far as engineering goes, like you do a lot of engineering work. Was the goal to always be like the engineer, like doing a lot of tracking, or were you thinking more along the lines of like eventually getting into like more of the mixing side of things? Was that even, you're just kind of like, maybe I'll just take whatever comes my way?
Right. I don't think I had a plan. It was just like, I'm going to go do this and take it as it comes. And so I came up a very traditional path, which is, I came to a studio. I worked as basically, a studio janitor is what you do as, you get an internship and you take out the trash and you make the coffee and you sort of kind of try to pick up what you can. And then you go, your time runs out and you go to another studio and do the same thing until you eventually get hired. And then you come up under all the people at the studio. And then where I was, the next step was to be an assistant. And then you're just working on tracking sessions. And then the next step was to be a tracking engineer. So it just kind of fell in line. Like the next step wasn't to be a mix engineer, it was to be a tracking engineer. So
Gotcha.
That's kind of where it went.
It was like more of like the ladder of that studio that you worked out of.
Right.
Yeah. Was that Blackbird?
Yeah. So at first, when I moved to Nashville, I worked at a studio called Sony Tree, which was the studio that the publishers used over there to like demo all their songs. So it was busy. It was a great place to be because it was busy all the time.
I'd imagine you'd work on like a lot of different styles of music in that kind of environment as well.
It was mostly country demos, and they would work at a really fast pace. It would be like 5 songs every 3 hours.
Oh, wow. That's insane.
You'd have like 3-hour blocks a day, and you do 5 songs in the morning, 5 songs in the afternoon, and 5 songs at night. And so you got to see a lot of musicians coming through and doing a lot of work.
Some people would hear what you just said there and like freak out at that idea. Like, I know people that are listening to this that have been working on songs for like years. So the idea of like recording like 5 songs in a few hours, like how does it happen that fast?
I mean, honestly, I was kind of blown away as, I was probably 22 when I moved here and started doing that. And, I just didn't know what was happening. because I just didn't know enough about, process and engineering. I was just there and I was just trying to absorb it all and keep up.
So then as far as like being able to work that fast, though, is it just like efficiencies in terms of the way the studio is set up, or is it just like the quality of the musicians or the way you're tracking things? Like
both. Like, and in Nashville, you learn that the musicians are the best in the world.
Fair.
So they'll come in and learn the song and just go out there and start playing, and you're like, wait, how's that happening?
Yeah, it's amazing to witness that.
Right. And so for that to be the first thing you see, and you still have this kind of like, well, maybe I'm still going to be a guitar player. And for that to be the first thing, you're just like, no, that's not happening. Okay, we're going all in on this engineering thing.
Fair. Well, I mean, you hear stories of people taking like hours to set up like drum kits, or sometimes in some cases days to set up like a drum set and get like the right tones. How did that work from the efficiency standpoint at those studios? Was there like a house kit that was just all ready to go?
At that studio, I mean, a lot of times the drummer would just have, their cartage, which is, a company that brings in their drums. They set them up, and the engineer just puts the mics on them, as quick as possible, and gets the sounds in like 5-10 minutes, and then you're up and running. I mean, there's no like, oh, let's spend like half an hour changing out bass drums, or let's try a different reso head on this bass drum, or let's try a different. No, they have, this is what we do. Maybe they're going to try a different mic on this session, but they know that this is how much work we have to get done today, and this is the amount of time we have to do it. And these are, at that studio, they were demos, so it's something that they're going to take to an artist and say, hey, do you want to re-record this song? But they still want it to be as good as it can be.
I guess there's a little bit of forgiveness in it at that stage.
Right, but it's almost like nobody has the mentality of it's only a demo.
Fair.
There's never that. It's always, get it as best we can.
Yeah. And I also would guess too that like, yeah, it's a combination of like, you got top of the top people with their instrument who know the gear really well, know how to get the tones that they need for the certain styles. And then from a studio perspective, you've probably got certain inputs that you're always going into for certain mics. And so like in that sense, it's a little bit more structured and allows you to work faster.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when I got to Blackbird, it was kind of the same. You were seeing a lot of the same things, but then you'd also have these huge records that would come in for months at a time. And then those you would see, let's take days to get a sound.
And so what would you say is like the biggest difference then between those like fast sessions and the ones that have a little bit more time? Like quality wise, like how big of a difference does it actually make to spend that extra time in your mind?
I mean, I think it's always a case by case thing. I mean, you can't always put them side by side and say, well, it's such a subjective.
Fair.
I mean, we work in such a subjective field that I can't take this record and this record and go, well, this was made in 5 minutes and this was made in 5 years, and which one's better? I don't know that I can answer that. It's just a whole different mindset.
If you're a fan of the Master Your Mix podcast, you might not even know yet that we actually have a full website packed with a ton of resources designed to help you make better mixes. So head on over to MasterYourMix.com, and on there you're going to find free downloads, cheat sheets, blog articles, books, courses, and a whole bunch more, all designed to help simplify your mixing process, give you more clarity, and help you finish more music without second-guessing every move. And then, if you're looking for more personalized one-on-one help, where I can work directly with you on your tracks and walk you through the recording, editing, and mixing processes step by step, that's exactly what I work on inside of my coaching program, Amplitude. And you can learn more about that at masteryourmix.com/amplitude. And on that page, you can book a free call with me where we can talk through your current process, figure out where your gaps are, and identify the fastest ways to help you move forward with your tracks. And then if it makes sense to work together beyond that call, we can absolutely talk about that too. So once again, that's masteryourmix.com. And then for coaching, masteryourmix.com/amplitude. I guess I asked that question just because I think it does kind of highlight the fact that there's this spending more time doesn't always equal like dramatically different results.
No, but it can lead you to possibilities that you may not have uncovered had you not spent the time.
And I would also assume too that obviously with those faster sessions, like you're probably tracking everything live off the floor. When you got to Blackbird, was it a lot of the same stuff, like live off the floor, or did you ever get into the sessions that were like more individual instruments were recorded separate, that kind of thing?
Both. So I don't think I'd ever seen a session done where it was individually tracked before I got to Blackbird. And so you'd see different producers obviously doing it different ways. And so I always thought when you go make a record, your band gets in a room and you all play. That's the way you record. And then the first time I was like, wait, what are you doing? Why is there only one person out there? How is this going to work? And then it's like, oh, wow, you can do that?
Yeah, it's a different mindset, but I guess it's just different focus. And obviously it's dependent on time and budget constraints and all that stuff too, right?
Yeah, and it's just a different way to do it, and it yields a different result. And, there's no right or wrong. It's all about the end result.
For sure. With your experience of having done both, do you feel like one approach is better for certain things than another?
Yeah. Yeah, I think certain things like to have that attention to one person at a time. I think that allows you to focus on certain elements more than the live aspect. I think for each record you have to think about, what's the best way to capture this? Like, is it going to be better to have the drums go by themselves so we can focus in on all the little details? Or is it going to be better for everybody to be in the room at the same time doing it for that energy? It's a decision you have to make. And, once you've made that decision, you kind of have to go with it.
Fair. Yeah. And I'm assuming a lot of that is dictated by the producers you're working with as an engineer, like whatever their process is, right? Well, speaking of which, like you've had the chance to work with a lot of really awesome producers, like Nick Raskulinecz, Vance Powell, Joe Ciccarelli, people like that. Like, what would you say are some of the biggest lessons you learned from working with people like those guys?
Oh,
maybe a loaded question. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned so many things from all those guys. It's like, I don't know if there's one all-encompassing takeaway. It's just the level of professionalism that all of those people have is inspiring. I mean, if that's one takeaway you could have, all of them have their own individual strengths, and they all bring their own things to the table and in their own respective. They all work in different areas of music,
Well, I mean, is there anything in particular that you maybe like had seen for the first time that you're like, oh, like this is a really interesting way of working?
Well, I think with Nick, it was the tracking everything individually. That was the real big takeaway from him I took. It was like, oh, wow, this is a new way of doing it. I really like this. I really like seeing how he works with bands. With Joe, it was, his ability to just craft an environment in sound very quickly. And the same with Vance. Vance has an ability to do that, to craft this environment of sound very quickly that's very intriguing.
Yeah. So how, if at all, does your approach to engineering change depending on the producers that you're working with?
Oh, it can change drastically because, you have to know that different producers have different ways they expect to hear stuff. So if I'm working with producer A, I might know that he likes really bright, sounds, whereas producer B likes really dark, mushy sounds. So I'm always have to be, it's almost like it doesn't matter what I want. It does a little bit, but I have to be very fluid in like thinking about, it's got to sound good first of all, but it's got to also be in line with this guy's vision, and that's tied to their personal tastes. And so you always have to be like, I know this guy likes a lot of mics and a lot of options and a lot of clarity. I know this guy likes minimal mics, you know, not as much focused on clarity, you know, more focused on, you know, feel, you know, that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
So is it just like a lot of research that you're doing beforehand just to get used to that, or is it all conversations in the moment?
It's more just like trying to read people and past experience of working with them. You know, like if you're working with somebody for the first time, it's like you don't really know. You just kind of have to get through it. You have a conversation with them and kind of try to get out of them, what are you going for? You know, what do you like? Here's what I usually will use. Does that sound good to you? And they'll be like, no, I don't want to use that. Let's do this.
Yeah, then you're flexible with it, for sure. That makes sense. Yeah. Well, kind of on a similar note, like you've had the chance to work with a lot of artists that have like very unique signature tones. And, you know, I think about bands like Deftones or Alice in Chains or Korn. Like there are elements of those bands' sound that is distinctly them. And I'm curious to know, like, when it comes to working on sessions like that, how much of that signature sound is the musician themselves versus maybe the production techniques that go behind those sounds?
Oh, well, I mean, I think probably 90% of any sound is coming from the person performing. Like the most important thing is the person playing the instrument or singing or whatever. That's the most important. Like that's where your sound is coming from. So like the person playing the drums, that's where the sound is coming from. Or the person playing the guitar, that's where the sound is coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it, like when I think of a band like Korn, for example, like their bass tone is obviously such a signature thing. Like no one else is going to be able to get that sound except for the player himself, right?
No, I mean you put that same bass in somebody else's hands, and it's not the same sound.
Yeah, and does that change like your approach to engineering a band when you know that there is like a signature element to that? Like, are you trying to like do any research ahead of time or do any sort of prep to know like what makes that sound up, you know?
I think you just kind of rely on like, well, they have had a great tech that I had a lot of conversations with him about, you know, what amps have they been using? Well, with a band like Korn, you know, I started listening to Korn when I was like 11 years old. So I was a huge fan all through my teenage years. So I already knew. I mean, those records were ingrained in my DNA. So I knew going in what their sound was. So I had a huge advantage there. And, you know, I already knew what amps, what guitars, like the whole thing. And then just having conversations with their tech about their amps and you know, just kind of letting, you know, you just let them do their thing and don't try to put anything extra on top of it.
Fair. If they got something that's working, just preserve that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I guess it does definitely help to have a tech in the room who really has seen it all and been there the whole journey. They've seen all the mics and amp setups and whatever, right?
I think sometimes those guys are sometimes your best resource because they've been around for the whole time. And
they know the gear better than the musicians themselves sometimes.
Yeah. You're like, hey, what guitar did they use on this song, on this record? This one. This is the one they used.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember. I feel like it was like, I read an interview with someone who worked on a U2 session and they were like, yeah, the Edge doesn't even know how to hook up his guitars. Like he's had a tech that does it forever, right? So like that guy knows the sound.
They knew at one time how to do it. That's always fascinating to me. At some point, you knew how to do it.
Fair. And then with a band like Deftones, like I think of like the vocals having that kind of like chorusy sound like to them. Like, is that just like a layering decision? Is that something that in the moment you're like trying to capture like with extra processing on the way in, or like what? Or is that just like a producer's decision to make that call?
Well, I can't speak too much on the vocal process for them because Nick and Chino did most of that themselves. But, from the little I was involved in the vocal process of that, it's a lot of effects, and Chino has, very specific ideas of what he wants, and he knows exactly what kind of delay he wants and what kind of vocal effect he wants, and so he's got it pretty dialed in.
Makes sense. It's like his gear, right? He knows it.
Right, exactly. He's got specific pedals that he puts on his voice, and he just knows. He's been, he's got it all covered.
Fair. Well, speaking of Deftones, you have obviously got to work with them, and when I think of them, like one of the elements of that band that I absolutely love, and maybe I'm biased because I'm a drummer, but like the drums always stand out to me on those records. On the record that you worked on, like the drums sound massive. They've got a lot of weight to them, but they also don't sound like they're like they've got a ton of low end either. Like they're not like so low end heavy that they're like muddy or like overly boomy, that kind of thing, right? They just have the punch to them. So I'm curious if you could talk about a little bit about the recording process with drums and what that looked like.
Yeah, we went to East West Studio in Los Angeles, California. I think it was, I don't know what they call the room. I think it was Studio A. It's the one with the Neve, with the 8078, the big one. So we were in that room, a big room. So, obviously we had to build like a baffles around the drum kit to contain that energy in there. And I mean, it was standard, standard mics, standard drums, a lot of different snare drums on, there's probably a different snare drum on every song, standard close miking on everything. And then, lots of room mics. Different room mics that were probably used on different songs. I didn't mix it, so I don't know exactly what got used everywhere, but there wasn't anything, there was a couple times where we ran like mics through amps and stuff like that, like cool effecty things that you'll hear throughout the record. Or like one of the things was like we had a bunch of talkback mics in the room set up for all the band members, and they were all on a bus. And
oh, cool.
I mean, you hear everybody talking about this all the time. We're like, oh, I just used the talkback as the room mic, but we did that because I started unmuting. I think it was by accident, like they all got unmuted, and I was like, what's that sound? I was like, that's what we need right there. And so there's like talkback. There was at one point the talkback mic started getting used as room mics, and it was a fun thing because it's such a big room. They have so many mics options that you can use. But other than that, I mean, it was pretty standard stuff. I think we used like U87s on the toms, which was a little different than what I would normally do.
Very cool. So in a large room like that, do you generally prefer to like kind of baffle in the drums to get like a tighter sound and then also still capture the liveliness of the room? Is that your general approach there?
Yeah, because I think if you don't put the baffles, it's just too washy, and you lose a lot of low end.
Yeah, I guess you don't want too much of that bleed coming in, right?
That and then sometimes like I find that like the kick sounds woofy in the room, or like you want to tunnel it, so it's like it serves two functions. It'll keep some of the cymbal bleed out of the kick mics, and it'll also sort of dampen the kick down in the room a little bit, because sometimes that buildup of that kick, while it sounds good in the room, it'll sort of take that impact away.
And are you adding a lot of processing on the way in?
I mean, I use a lot of EQ on the way in, but not heavy on the compression on the way in, but a good amount of EQ for a record like that. For a heavier record, I use a lot of EQ on the way in. For something that's more like if like we're doing like Americana or country or something that doesn't require as much transient clarity, I probably won't add as much EQ on the drums.
Well, and that was kind of another question that I was curious about, like with transients, like how do you balance punch versus body in the tracking environment?
I don't know that I think about it much when I'm in there doing it. It's like, you use your polarity flips to kind of get you halfway there, make sure everything's in agreement there. That's a huge part of it, to make sure everything's hitting right, because if it's, things can get mushy if they're not in agreement. And then, mic placement is a big thing. If your mics aren't placed right, there's just like all these little fighting things in there that will reduce punch.
Fair. What's your normal go-to miking setup for drums? Do you have a kind of standard that you typically would set up with?
Yeah, I put obviously an in mic in the bass drum, an out mic, a top and bottom snare, tom mics, hat, and then pretty typically I'll do overheads, like 2 spaced overheads pretty near the cymbals, because I like to hear the separation of the cymbals. And then sometimes I'll do a mono overhead, although I've been doing that sometimes less. It just depends on what I'm after. And then a couple sets of room mics, like a close set and a far set, and then something else interesting.
Just like you have a weird mic somewhere.
Yeah, because I find that can be interesting. And then a lot of times what I'll do is one extra mic unprocessed that I can use later as an effects that I can kind of destroy. And I might not even listen to that. And I may not use all those mics later.
Do you have a favorite kind of setup for that weird mic? Are there any? What are some examples of places that you've put them that are unique?
It depends on what room I'm working in. There's a room over at Blackbird that I work in a lot that I'll use an Altec bird cage, in the corner. I kind of like what that's giving me right now, and I'll probably change my mind in a month and use something different. But I really like what that gives me. Or it might be a U47 somewhere if they have it, or it might be a PZM taped to the wall somewhere. Just something else, like a mono something else.
Yeah. And are you walking around the room trying to find that weird spot or that weird ambience that exists there?
Sometimes if it's in a new room, I'll walk around while the drummer plays, kind of plug my ears. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because, I got to rest. I don't want to blow my ears out in the first 5 minutes of the day. But I'll walk around and see if I feel in my body, something interesting. You'll feel a low end bump or something. You'll be like, oh, maybe this will be a good spot. And sometimes it's not. I mean, sometimes you throw that mic away. It's that didn't work at all.
But then other times you get the talkback mic thing, and then it's something cool, right?
Right. Or, I don't know, maybe the guy that mixed that was like, this is terrible, and muted it.
Fair, yeah. I guess you really need to ask the mixer to know whether it was useful or not, right?
Right.
No, that's cool though. I love that. I've always been a big fan of trying to find the weird spot in the room or outside of the room. My favorite things in home setups are put a mic in a bathroom. You get some of the best sounds there.
And I think that one of the great things about digital recording, I get a lot of heat from some guys that, I use too many mics and this and that. And we have the tracks, just record it. And if you don't like it, throw it away. One of my really good friends, who's a great engineer, is always, well, unmute it. If it makes it better, use it. If it doesn't make it better, don't use it.
For sure. And I think that that's something that a lot of mixers just have difficulty with, is just that idea of just muting tracks. And maybe it's a matter of just having those relationships with those people to know what their approach is, because some people have no problems muting mics, and other people it's they think that is they expect that the source tracks are coming to them sounding the way it was intended to be, and
right. And I think for a long time I had such reservation about getting rid of something that I recorded. It's well, I recorded it, I gotta make it work somehow. It's no, you don't really. If it's not working, it's not working. Just get rid of it.
Yeah, and again, I guess it's just a matter of those lines of communication with the producers and the engineers and everyone down the chain to know what they're getting and why they're getting it.
It can be very liberating to to just throw something away.
Absolutely. And sometimes too, like you realize just how much better it is to be minimal with it. Like I often think about like people layering guitar sounds and like, you get all these people that will like quad track guitars or do even more layers. And sometimes just like reducing it is the easiest way to get the clarity that you're really after.
Yeah, unless you have super tight hands, I mean, it's going to be the clearest picture is going to be with one guitar. I mean, for clarity purposes, it's never going to be more clear than that.
Yeah. So then when you're tracking guitars, is that something that you generally try to stick to, is like as few layers as possible, or is that something where you would want to layer more?
I think it just depends on the sound you're after. I mean, it's kind of genre dependent. For certain sounds, you have to layer. And then for other things, I think you have to have a discussion about, what is this layer? What purpose is it serving? Because some guys just want to layer guitars. And you have to go, okay, well, let's back up for a second. You don't want to put 15 layers of the same exact tone on the chorus. It's just louder and mushier.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think that like, a lot of people who don't have that experience of mixing that kind of stuff after the fact, like louder equals better to them, and the more layers, the better, right? But like,
it's scientifically proven, right? Louder is better.
Fair. Well, I definitely want to dig into guitars a little bit more, but I want to go back to the drums, because one of the things that you mentioned was something I was curious about, which was this idea of separation. And when I think of the Korn record in particular, Serenity of Suffering, with that record, like there's just so much separation in those drums. And like I feel like I can hear things bouncing around speakers so clearly, like all the cymbal hits, like everything seems very, very like intentionally designed to live in a certain space in the stereo field of the mix. And I'm curious to know about like that separation in the tracking stage and how you go about doing that. Is that just the product of like having a drummer who has a massive kit that is like, and is very intentional about which things they're hitting because they know where it's going to fit in the final mix? Or is that a technical decision?
I think it's all of the above. It's, first of all, Josh Wilbur did an amazing job mixing that. Nick did an amazing job producing that. Ray did an amazing job playing that. It was recorded well. That was just a great record, and every part of it came together well. And yeah, sure, the way it was mic'd helped. I mean, I mic'd in that situation, we mic'd probably every little cymbal that he was going to hit. And now those mics might not have stayed open the whole time. Like this splash mic over here probably wasn't sitting open the whole time. I can remember once we got done recording it, I went and rode those things up and down or like cut them out so they're not, you don't want like 20 mics sitting open the whole time because it's just a nightmare.
Very interesting. Yeah, I was curious about that if you were spot micing all the cymbals. So after the fact, when you say you would clean those up, were you like just cutting individual hits of like, a splash cymbal on its own, or were you just ducking everything else around that cymbal hit, or what did that look like?
That I can't exactly. I mean, I don't know how many years ago that was, but I probably put them at a very low level. It depends on what the bleed sounded like. If it was heinous, which I don't think it was on that. So if it was heinous, I would have cut it out. Or if it was, not so bad sounding, probably low level and then ridden. It just depends on what it sounded like. If you write it up and it sounds like abrupt, you would just want to cut it.
How does... Like, what's that process look like as far as phase relationships when you're spot micing that many things?
Yeah, you can't get that right. I mean, it's impossible. It's hard enough to get, your overheads and your snare and your kick all in agreement. And then when you start adding, okay, this splash mic and that China mic and this third cymbal over here and this ozone cymbal, I mean, none of that's going to be perfectly coherent, and it's my nightmare.
Yeah, I'd imagine that would be like, obviously having a cymbal hit for like a split second, like a splash cymbal, for example, like a little accent, like you're not going to really notice the phasiness on that one hit, right? But yeah, if you had everything live, yeah, I could see how that would just be a complete clusterfuck.
You do the best you can, and kind of my general rule of thumb is I'll always try to check every mic against the snare. Like when I'm testing, I don't have the drummer out there doing that because he doesn't want to like have an assistant or someone, hit the snare and I'll test, but get it the best.
When you say the best, like what are you listening for in that process?
Usually I'm listening for like if while you're hitting the snare, if the snare gets fuller, that's the way I'm going to go.
Just listening for like the meat.
Yeah. If it doesn't make any difference, then I'll leave it unflipped. I don't want to, the older I get, the more I don't want to get too bogged down in that, because you can get into this endless loop of like, is this better? Is this better? Is this better? Is this better?
Yeah. And I imagine too that like, going back to what you talked about, like in your early days, like that Nashville studio where you started, like speed is still of the essence there, and so you can't be like nitpicking over too much phase wise. Like,
I don't think at the end of the day, the phase of the splash cymbal that's only going to come up for 5 times over the course of a 6-minute song or 2 times. It's not. It's not going to.
We're spending days over. Yeah.
No. We got to move on from that.
For sure.
I mean, younger me was guilty of spending and people know this. Younger me was guilty of spending and caring too much about that. And now I'm like, you know what? Okay, we can move on from that.
Fair. Well, and also to your other point, like someone might just mute it in the mix anyway. So like,
correct. They might
why
add
waste
their
all that
own
time, right?
superior drummer splash. Their mine sounds better than yours.
Yeah, some sort of sample in there for sure. Right on. Well, now I want to bounce back to the guitar side of things, and with a lot of music that you work on being like heavier music, I think you do a great job with guitar tones. And I'm curious to know, like, when it comes to capturing those heavy guitar tones, what would you say is the biggest contributing factor there? I know we talked about layering a little bit, but like, what other elements do you think contribute to ultimately the guitar being heavy?
Well, I mean, obviously the guitar player is the number one factor, and then the instrument being set up correctly and with the proper gauge of strings for whatever tuning they're using is a big factor.
On that note, do you have any tips there for picking the right gauge for certain tunings?
Yeah, it's you don't want to put 9s on a guitar if you're tuned down to G.
Fair.
I've seen that, and it's just like, well, that's not going to work. I would say go with the lowest gauge that you possibly can get away with. That's always been my preference, within reason,
Now, on that note, I have heard some people say that like a heavier gauge string, is that what you mean by the lowest?
Yeah.
Okay.
Heavy.
Okay. I thought you meant like lowest in number, so thinnest string. Yeah, okay.
No. I prefer heavy gauge, and that's a big thing I learned from working with Nick was, I had never even considered gauge of string, but that's important. Tuning is hugely important. Making sure, and that's where, you got to have the guitar set up and intonated and, making sure you're in tune, because all these chords, these heavy chords with distortion, as soon as if you do start layering them, which you're going to do, all that tuning, if it's out, it's not going to sound good. Like all this stuff before we haven't even talked about the amp head yet.
Yeah, it's just like the guts of like the guitar. Like we're just starting at the basics, right?
And just making sure it's in tune and and then, picking the right head for the sound, I mean, obviously sometimes you only have depending on your budget and who you're working with, you might only have this one head to work with. So, and if that's the case, then that's what you got. But if you have multiple heads, then you should probably try all of them and see what's going to be the best. I mean, you could probably rule some out just by looking, that's not going to be right. And then, which cabinet's going to pair best with that head. You might have a certain cabinet that and then you might be surprised by it. I'm always, if I can take the time to listen to this through that, and then, okay, well, then let's compare this to this. Sometimes I'm surprised by what I thought was going to be the sound, and then I hear something else and I go, wait a minute, well, there's something really interesting about that, though.
Are there any examples that you can give of that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always sort of gravitated toward Mesa cabinets. I've played Mesa cabinets my whole life, and in the studio, they always sound good to me. And sometimes I'll just go, well, let's just set this up through a Mesa cabinet. And I was working with a band last year where the guitar player really wanted to try some old Marshall cabinets, and I forget which one I pulled. I think it had some like G12Hs in it, and I had a Mesa cabinet because I was like, we're just going to use the Mesa cabinet because, you know, they sound great. And I think I had like a Friedman BE 100 that I was testing, and I said, okay, well, and so I set up, you know, as best I could match, you know, the same set of mics on the Mesa and on the Marshall. And, you know, same mic, same pre's, same types, you know. It was really wild because I plugged into the Marshall and I was like, whoa, that sounds awesome. Like, it sounded great through the Mesa, but then through the Marshall, I was just like, wow, okay, all right, let's use the Marshall.
Fair. So then how much time do you find yourself spending on like doing shootouts of different heads or cabinets, or is it just like kind of time is of the essence and make it happen fast?
It just depends on how much time we have, you know, and how much time the artist is going to let me have, or the producer is going to let me have. I'll take as much time as you give me. I'll take days if you give me days, but I know I'm never going to have days.
Fair.
But I'm a nerd, man. I will sit there and shoot stuff out all day. I'll shoot out cables. But not many people are going to have the patience for that. I realize that, you know, people get bored of that stuff pretty quickly. Like the guy on the couch with his guitar ready to play wants to play the song. He doesn't want to sit there and, all right, now let's try this speaker. Let's try this speaker. Let's try this speaker. Sometimes they do, and when it's a dedicated time to do that, then it's okay. But I think you have to be very conscious of everybody around you and what they're feeling, and if you notice them getting bored, it's time to stop.
Yeah, if you see any inkling of boredom, that's a sign that you're doing too much.
Time to move on.
Of course. Well, I heard you on another podcast talking about how you are a really big fan of real cabinets as opposed to like, you know, the people who are just using like amp sims and or like Kempers or XFX or whatever. And obviously the cabinets can make a really big difference, but so can the microphones as well. And we haven't even got into that part yet. How do you navigate that selection process of finding the right cabinet with the right microphone, with the right head, I suppose?
I mean, there's so many possibilities that it's daunting at times. Like I said, I usually would gravitate toward like a Mesa cabinet because I have to have a starting point, I think. You know,
it's like your familiar thing that you know.
And usually if it's a band, like if I'm working with a band and let's say I'm producing, or like if it's the producer, if I'm working with another producer, it's going to be their decision, right? But let's say I'm producing and engineering, I'm usually going to start with whatever their gear is. Like, let's start with your sound. Like, what head and cabinet are you using? Let's start there. And then if we want to compare, then let's bring something else in. And because you always have to have, okay, what is our starting point? So somewhere to start from, and then like, okay, we have two other things available. Let's try this cabinet with that head. Is it better? Do we like it better? No. Okay, let's go back to yours.
Yeah, it's like, can we beat it with what we have available and do it quickly?
Right. I mean, because, and realize that you can, I mean, in today's time, you have every option in the world available to you if you want it. There has to be a limit at some point.
But that's also an interesting topic too, is that idea of like just making decisions. Like there's so many people that will live in this endless like cycle of chasing sounds and experimenting, and like obviously when you're in a studio getting paid and there's limited time and budget, you have to just do it. But there's also a confidence factor in that as well, of like being able to trust your instincts to get something that sounds good right off the bat as well, right?
Right. I mean, you have to make a decision and move forward, or, I mean, you're still going to be sitting there getting sounds when the record should have been out.
Well, you won't be doing that because you'll be fired long before then, right?
Right. I mean, get something that's going to serve the music and be confident that that's the right choice. And if you get to the end and it's just wrong, then do it again. I mean, we always have that option as a last resort.
Of course. So then we talked about cabs, we talked about heads. What about miking? Like, what's your go-to setup there?
Oh, I mean, as boring as it is, I usually will start with a 57. I mean, because that's the sound that we all know. I mean, that's kind of the baseline. I like multiple miking on guitar cabinets, and I'll usually put it on different speakers, and I'll try to pair a mic that doesn't sound exactly the same, like, so a mic that complements, like, so, it's if I have a 57 and a 421, those will work. A 57 and some kind of ribbon mic, or if I have a FET 47 and a 421, or just things that pair, that seem like a brighter mic and a darker mic has always been kind of my, let's put these together and see, and maybe it's just one mic.
It's like kind of combining the or like finding mics that make up for the deficiencies of the other, like, that kind of thing.
Right. You want to add them together and have one that complements the other, instead of having two that sound exactly the same and then it just gets louder. I've seen people do a 57 straight on and an angled 57. I mean, that's two mics, but if one's angled, it's kind of a different sound. So,
yeah. And even different speakers themselves will have different tonal qualities too. So you can kind of play with that as well.
Right. And if you have the time, like if it's a cabinet that you don't know, and if you have the time to test all the speakers to find out, what the difference is in the speaker, that can be a huge advantage of knowing this speaker sounds way better than that speaker.
Yeah, you may find that within like a 412, there's one that does sound better than the rest.
Yeah. It's alarming sometimes.
Yeah, I think people don't spend enough time to like actually learn their gear that intimately, but like especially for people that are working from home with their own gear, it's like if you have the luxury of time, like actually spend it to learn how different all of those speakers sound in that cabinet, because there's probably drastically different results that you'll get out of them.
Oh yeah, and the way I do it is I'll just take the same mic and put it in the same place on each speaker and record a little bit, try to play the same thing, or get somebody to play the same thing, and then record a little bit, and then just bounce back and forth between them and go, oh wow,
and
that speaker sucks.
And we're not talking about like 457s on like four speakers. We're talking about use the same mic so that you hear that like there's less variables there.
Same mic, same chain, same person playing. I mean, there's gonna be a variable because
Yeah, just naturally you're gonna have that, and even like the like slanted cabs have a different thing than like.
Oh yeah. Or the bottom speaker, or because of the room that they're in, the bottom speakers may not sound good because of like their relationship to the floor. There's all sorts of things to think about. But yeah, so I'll use. I mean, there's one studio I work out here in town that has a 414 with it says it's a 414 with the CK1 with the brass capsule, and I don't know what is wrong with this 414, but it is the best sounding guitar cabinet mic I've ever heard in my entire life. Like I was just looking for some other option to put on a guitar cabinet, and I was like, this 414 is probably not going to sound good, and I put it on there, and I opened up the channel, and I just went, I thought something was wrong. I was like, that's got to be like multiple mics, and so I went back, traced it to the wall. I mean, there's rarely a time where you're like troubleshooting because something sounds too good.
That's the best problem to have, right?
Right. I'm like, okay. I mean, I was like, what? Why? Okay, great. Awesome.
But that's also interesting there too. Like, there's a lot of 414s and they all sound different, and just likewise, like all 57s sound different too. So like, it's just I guess it's an experience thing that like when you have the time to learn those pieces of gear really well, like you're armed with that knowledge. But otherwise, just make decisions quickly. I guess if it's like an unfamiliar room and time is of the essence.
Yeah, that's the worst case scenario is unfamiliar room, and you have to do it quick.
Yep. Right on, dude. Dude, this has been awesome. I've loved learning more about your process for like drums and guitars. And yeah, it's just been really cool to get a little bit more insight into some of these records that you worked on. So thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Man, thanks for having me.
If people want to learn more about you, follow you online, maybe even work with you, like what's the best way for them to do that?
I have a simple website, nathanyarborough.com. It's basically just a list of credits and has a contact form that goes to my email. You can contact me through there. You can email me at inyarborough@gmail.com, or I have an Instagram page that you can look me up there.
Awesome.
So any of those places.
I'll put those in the show notes as well so people have access to those.
Great.
Awesome, man. Dude, I really appreciate this. Like, thank you so much for taking the time to do it. And yeah, definitely really helpful.
Oh, thank you.
So that was my episode with Nathan Yarborough, and it was really cool to learn more about his experience of working with bands like Deftones and Korn. At least for me, like I grew up listening to a lot of that stuff when I was younger, and like all throughout my high school ages, like I was definitely like a bit of a metalhead, and I loved those bands. And so the DNA of so many of those records, like Nathan talked about, it's very much ingrained in me as well. There's so much that I learned about engineering just by admiring those records and really studying like the tones that they were getting and just how everything came together. And to me, it was very fresh and different. It was like 7-string guitars, like that was new to me back then, right? So hearing how those kind of things all came together was really cool. And then to learn from Nathan a little bit more about the behind the scenes and the making of some of those records is really cool. And I love the music that those bands are making today. They still have those signature sounds, and it was really interesting to hear Nathan talk about that approach to preserving those signature sounds, and also interesting to hear more about the involvement of techs in the production process too, right? Not just people that help set up guitars live for shows. Like these people are also part of the studio experience as well, and helping to make sure that the sounds are preserved the way they're supposed to be. And they've gone through the whole process of seeing the different combinations of amps and cabs and guitars and mics and blah blah blah, right? So they often have the best knowledge about how to achieve signature sounds. So yeah, I thought that was really cool to learn from Nathan as well. I was also very fascinated with Nathan's approach to speed. And obviously being thrown to the fire, working at that studio in Nashville where they were recording 5 songs every 3 hours, like that is wild, but it also makes sense. That's possible when you come prepared, when you're working with top-notch musicians, and when you're also not really sweating a lot of the small stuff. Like obviously Nathan talked about how quality is still super important, but when you're in that kind of environment, like you just have to work fast, you have to be prepared, and you have to have some level of confidence in what you're doing. And I think it's equal parts refreshing to hear that, as well as a fun challenge to accept that you can record songs very, very fast. And I know a lot of people, like I mentioned in this episode, that will spend forever working on their music because they're nitpicking everything. But if some of the best players in the world are making songs in just a couple hours, that's a sign that you probably don't need to sweat the small stuff as much as you think. So it's a good challenge to put at yourself. Like, see how fast you can record a song. Give yourself a time limit. Sometimes, like, setting boundaries can be one of the best ways to realize what you're capable of doing. So that's just my fun challenge to you as a result of this episode that I would love to encourage. Tell yourself you only have 2 hours to record a song. Tell yourself you only have half hour to make a mix. Like, things like that force you to realize what actually matters. And when you focus on that stuff, you realize like how much quicker you can move on, and a lot of things that just really don't matter, which is just as important to know. And when you do that, you're also going to gain a level of confidence, which is really important, because obviously the more you know your equipment, the more you know what you're capable of doing, the faster you build up your confidence, right? Now, that said, if you're completely at a loss for what to do, if you're absolutely clueless about where to set up microphones and how to set up your instruments to get the best sounds, or how to ultimately mix them quickly, how to build your templates to work fast, and maybe you're just feeling stuck. If that's something that you would like help with, that's exactly what I work on with my students inside of my coaching program, Amplitude. In that program, I'm working one-on-one with you to help define and refine your process, how to optimize it so that you can record, edit, mix songs with confidence, with speed, and get the quality that you're after. And ultimately, to be able to have a vision in your mind of what the song should sound like before you even start, so that every decision you make moving forward is in support of that. And so if you're feeling stuck with your tracks, I would love to help you with that. And as part of this program, we're hopping on calls, I'm opening up mixes with you, we're mixing together, I'm mastering tracks with you. We're doing this all together. This is a very collaborative thing to make sure that you're getting the results that you want. And that anytime you're feeling stuck, you have me in your corner to help direct you so that you can ultimately get this confidence and make better music in less time with more confidence and feel proud of the level of quality that you're achieving. So if that sounds like something you'd find helpful, make sure to check out masteryourmix.com/amplitude. And on that page, you can find a link where you can book a call with me. It's absolutely free. I want to learn more about your process. I want to learn what's working for you, what's not working for you, where you're feeling stuck, and to see if there's anywhere that I can help you. And if there is, we can talk about the program, what it looks like to work with each other and how we can do that. And if I can't help you, I'll let you know. I only work with people who I truly believe I can help. So once again, masteryourmix.com/amplitude, and you can get all the details there. And it's 100% a free call, so make sure to check it out. Now that said, we're at the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Have a good one. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, send an email to questions@masteryourmix.com. And for more information on how to create pro recordings from your home studio, visit masteryourmix.com.